Um, and I think I'm going to start letting folks in.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Good morning, everyone. If you can all keep yourselves on mute for starting, just wanted to let you know we are recording this webinar. We will get started in just a minute. Just want to make sure we get everybody who is in the waiting room in before we start. We're expecting maybe a couple more people, and we'll give it one more minute and we'll get started on time. Nice to see everybody here today.
While we're waiting for people to join, if you wanted to drop into the chat where your role within your school and your work, that would be really helpful for us to just have a better sense of who's on the call. So welcome, everybody.
All right, since it is 11 o'clock and I have nobody in the waiting room, we are going to jump in with just some quick introductions. So, hi, everybody. I am Ellie Mitchell. I am the director of the Maryland Out of School Time Network. And many of you may know that we also serve as the backbone for the Maryland Coalition for Community Schools. We have for many, many years collaborated with Ramapo for Children on training and professional development around inclusion of youth with disabilities and out of school time, around restorative practices and some other things. And now they have become connected or merged with, or I'm sure Hannah can say it more accurately. And again, you're the National School Climate Center? Yep. Very good. Okay, I got it. We see this as a great overlap of our work with community schools in particular, but with really any of our educators who are interested in fostering and supporting positive school climates in their work. And so we wanted this opportunity to share with you some of the work that they're doing and some learning opportunities and professional development opportunities for you all. So I'm going to pass it over to Hannah, who will take it from here. But we look forward to continuing our work with Ramapo in lots of different ways. And, we're recording this webinar. So if you want to end up sharing it with somebody else, or you need to go back and hear something again, it will be there for you at the end. And I'll just sit back and I'll be looking at things in the chat and take it away, Hannah.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Ellie, and delighted to be here with you all. Some of you may be familiar with Ramapo from some of the work that we've done previously with many of your sites, and that is still very much a part of who we are. But over the course of the last 2 years, we've experienced some growth and changes that are really exciting. The first is in 2019, fall of 2019, we joined forces with the National School Climate Center, which we will be sort of focusing on some of the work that was born out of that organization today, specifically our School Climate Leadership Certification Program. So in a minute, I will share my screen so that you guys we'll start a conversation about what the certification program is, how it might be helpful for you and your roles and the really incredible work that you're doing, and also how it's so important at this really critical, pivotal moment in time. So we're excited to be here. And before we jump in, I'd just love to introduce my colleagues who are here with me today. First, Dr. Phil Brown. Right there. He helped found the School Climate Leadership Certification and has a deep, just cavernous wells of knowledge about how this work can show up in our schools and really improve the lives and experiences of educators and young people in school communities. And so he will be coming and speaking to us a little bit from the perspective of the coach who'll be coming alongside of you if you choose to do the certification. And then I'm also joined by Jen Griffiths, and Jen just completed her certification process and was just a phenomenal participant in this project. And she was coached by Phil. So we have a dynamic duo here to talk about their experiences. And Jen has a very specific entry point in thinking about school climate, and that is really being able to understand how we engage in deep school climate improvement work where we're not necessarily the principal who's in charge of everything, but how do we really lean into coalition building and community building as we seek to be leaders in transforming our schools. Phil or Jen, anything you'd like to say before we get started? Phil's good, Jen's good. All right, well, let's get started. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. And give me one moment while I remember how to hit present from here. Apologies. View. Can you guys see, what do you guys see right now? Do you see the presenter view? Yep. Okay, one second. Here we go. All right, I figured it out. Thank you for your patience. Quick background. The School Climate Leadership Certification was developed in 2010, starting in 2010, with the goal really to equip a critical mass of educational leaders with the knowledge base and competencies necessary to actually not just make a lot of changes that are going to improve the school for a moment, but to help make sure that we have educational leaders who are able to create sustainable change in schools that will continue even after they are no longer at that school or after the initiative is initially sort of ended, but that we're building into the fabric of our schools an approach to understanding and constantly improving the climate and lived experiences for the young people and for the educators. It's importantly, this emphasizes and articulates a school leader's role in school climate improvement. And when we say school leaders, we mean people who are taking on leadership roles within a school. It does not necessarily mean that this is for the principal, but this is for people who are in leadership positions who are invested in bringing people together to collectively impact the school experience. And the structure of the program is a coach scaffolded study. So what that means is that if you choose to be part of the certification program, you'll be paired with a coach like Phil. We have a large team of experts in the field who have a call with you every month to talk about how you are moving through the different learning modules, which we'll talk about in just a moment, helping you to brainstorm and creatively problem solve and look for new opportunities as you seek to really make this work manifest in your school community, and really guide you through a 5-stage process of school climate improvement, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And by just a moment, I mean right now. On the right side of your screen, you'll see a graphic that outlines the 5-stage school climate improvement process that this certification program leads you through. We start with preparation, which means how do we build a team of people in our school who are going to be invested in this work of really understanding and being able to strategically and intentionally listen to the voices in the community to better understand how we can shape and collaboratively build a more positive school climate. So we start with building a team, and then we engage in some evaluation. And that evaluation is really about using surveys and questionnaires and observations to understand what's really happening at our school and what is happening for all the different stakeholders within the school and for different subsets of our young people and of our educators throughout the building and outside the building as well. And then we do a really deep dive into that data. I think there have been many times in my education experience where I gather a lot of data and then I'm like, what should I do with this now? But the next step, which is really critical, we have some important tools and some support from our coaches to help us slide from all that data gathering to really deeply understanding what the data is telling us, and being able to not just turn that into action, but to turn it into something that is going to give us some traction, is going to help us be able to move forward with the work that is happening. So that's when we move into action planning. And then you'll have a coach supporting you in this process of implementing that action plan, understanding how all those big ideas and ways in which we were hoping to really support the lives of our young people and educators can actually be made manifest in our schools. And finally, the final stage is where we look at reevaluating. How did it go? What are some of the things that went really well we want to continue doing? What are some of the things that we made some big assumptions with that action planning idea, and we want to reassess that? Or you know what, we never actually heard from this whole subset of young people at our school, and we want to make sure we do that next time. And then go through that process again. Excuse me. So importantly, this is a coach scaffolded process that has a bunch of readings involved. We're just really grounded in research and reflecting on research. So we're not just like learning things so that we have them in our head. We're also thinking about how we translate this really important learning into who we are as educational leaders and as educators. You have access to some case studies and experiences of, as we noted earlier, the certification program has been going on for almost 10 years, actually more than 10 years. And we have lots of people, including Jen on this call, who have gone through this process before and have written case studies about their experience that can help inform you as you think about doing this work with your schools. We also have a large variety of protocols and activities that can help you be really strategic as you go through these 5 stages, to make sure we're asking good questions, that we have places to put the information that we're gathering across the whole project, and to make sure that we are able to record and document the artifacts of all the learning that's happening. And importantly, there are opportunities to also make connections between what's happening in your school and also what's happening in the broader policy landscape within your states, and also within your district and federally, to think about how some of the things we're learning in schools should be talking to some of the policy decision makers as we think about what school looks like here. So for the actual program, and we'll have time for some questions at the end, I promise. You won't be just listening to me talk this whole time. But the actual program it takes place over the span of about 2 years. We say 18 to 24 months because we like to make sure that people can take a breather during the summer and you don't have to feel like you're just constantly in the program the whole time. But it involves 18 one-hour coaching phone calls with your leadership coach, like Phil, where that person is going to be just building a relationship with you to better understand sort of who you are and your entry point in talking about and thinking about school climate and school climate improvement, and also really partnering with you in thinking about how you can build your own capacity to really make this work for your specific context, and really appropriate for the work that's happening there. There are also 6 guided learning modules, which are right now based on Google Classroom, that include some assigned readings, a wide variety of reflection tools as you think about those shared readings, implementation tools, which include things like, here's a protocol for or some activities to do with your school climate leadership team that you may have developed during the preparation stage. Here's some tools that'll help you sort of get the ball rolling with that. And here's some data collection tools and data audit tools and action planning tools. All of those things are included throughout each of the 6 guided learning modules. We also have 2 deep dives into special topics related to school climate. And when we say deep dives, what we're thinking about there is, school climate can be an all-encompassing and ought to be an all-encompassing idea. That many times in our schools, we have 14 different initiatives, but when we think really strategically about the school climate process, that can be sort of the umbrella that helps all of these other ideas and projects and initiatives sort of work together seamlessly. And sometimes we're going to need to sort of sink more deeply into some of the really big ideas that school climate touches on. So our deep dives include topics such as thinking about nurturing resilience in the context of school climate improvement, which is going to be a really big idea this fall in particular, and has been for a very long time. But as we think about all the transitions that are happening with our young people, nurturing resilience is a really important and big idea. And another deep dive topic that we have includes the idea of youth voice. And what are the ways we can be really intentional about centering the voices of our young people, understanding its importance, and building that into the fabric of our school climate improvement plan processes. And also, we include cohort meetings. So while your calls with your individual coach are going to be there's just the two of you sort of thinking about what you're learning and what you're planning in this process. But there are also opportunities for you to meet with other people who are doing the same process and be able to share ideas, share frustrations sometimes about things that maybe like, oh my gosh, I didn't even see this thing coming, but also be able to share some of the celebrations and hear what else is happening, not just in Maryland, but around the country. And finally, over the course of this 2-year project, you'll be gathering a lot of artifacts of the good work that you're doing. And all that will sort of come together into a portfolio that you'll then write a case study about that'll tell the story of the work that you did, and is a really wonderful way of honoring that work and also ensuring the sustainability of the work and engagement that you've been a part of. And I think that is the end of my overview. I'm wondering if I can ask Phil or Jen if there's anything important that I have left out of this overview.
I think you've covered the overall structure really well, and you know your stuff.
Thank you, Phil.
I could talk a little bit more about maybe the origins and why that's particularly important right now.
Absolutely, that would be great. Thank you, Phil.
First of all, I should tell you that my interest in community schools goes back to the 1990s, actually, in the first look at how to bring community services into schools. When I was in the New Jersey Department of Education, I spent a lot of time grappling with that issue and the certification and regulations that prevented people with real knowledge about how to help young people get their knowledge and services, make them available to kids in the school context. So I'm a firm believer in the approach to the work you're doing, especially for kids who have special needs of different kinds. When we sat down to look at what we knew and had learned in working with school climate issues with schools, one of the things that a number of us felt was a significant, important learning was the fact that while there was always a press for new programs, new efforts based on research, that we continually saw that even the best programs failed or couldn't take root if the school climate and culture weren't prepared for them, didn't welcome them, and didn't have people who understood what it was going to take to implement them well and with fidelity. So that the huge amount of effort and expense was put into well-intended efforts that didn't really meet expectations, and that school climate and culture essentially represents the groundwork, the home, the nest for whatever happens, and that essentially kids learn about how to interact with the space we've created for them in schools in a variety of ways, but that the key elements were not often honored by program-oriented approaches. Also, we realized as we worked with people who were doing this well and making a difference, that it wasn't information or understanding they'd gotten from their professional training or development. It was stuff that they learned because they were astute professionals and had figured out how to do this work. And so we looked at, well, how can we take what we've learned in watching and learning from schools that have done well in implementing school climate as a transformative process, and bring it to people who would be thirsty for that understanding as a way of growing professionally and becoming more effective in their work. And so what I can tell you about this program as it's matured over the last decade is that we found that we can work with people with a variety of different backgrounds. So we've worked with people who are school psychologists and who have a good kind of foundational background for this work, but we've also worked with people who are tech specialists or who have a lot of background in technical assistance and training, but don't really know this content area. So we found that we can work with people who can have entered this program with a variety of backgrounds and interests and still provide something that's going to be meaningful. I think the other two other critical points to take off from Hannah's introduction. One is that the program is built to be flexible. We know that day-to-day life in schools for you all can be daunting, can be overwhelming, can be more than you asked for. And so we found ways to work through those issues with people so that while there's a structure and a sequence and timelines, all of the coaches work with people where they're at and with the constraints that they're functioning under. The other, I think, important point is that we really have experience that this can be transformative work in two ways. If it's done well, it can be transformative for a school, and it can be transformative professionally for people who engage in this work and find a way to bring it forth. So we've got a lot of supporters out there now who really see this, and Jen is certainly an example of that. The research that backs this up is increasingly deep and wide, and it's informed both by practitioners like yourselves as well as by researchers. But more importantly, some of the things we've learned that have added to the strength of the program are features that Hannah has gone through. That is, we have an increased emphasis on equity issues that we've become better and better at addressing, and that's represented in the coaches as well. We've become a lot better at understanding how to engage school leadership when the people we're coaching are not necessarily the decision makers, which is a real issue. That is, this assumes that you are change agents if you're part of this program, but the change agentry is different based on your role and your ability to persuade decision makers about the right course to get on. So we're sensitive to a lot of the issues that people with different roles in school bring to this process. But on the other hand, it's true that you need a school to work with through the process. That it's not just you; it's implementation oriented from the beginning. So that to be successful in the program, you need a school that you're working with continually over a period of time. So maybe I'll stop there so that Jen has a full opportunity. And Hannah, I don't know if you want to weigh in or comment on anything I've said that or correct assumptions that I may have made.
No, I don't think so, Phil. I think that's great. And I think most of the things I want to share, I'll share in a minute when Hannah gives us some questions.
Sounds good. And Phil, no corrections at all. I think it's flexibility has always been an important component for anything supporting people working in schools, and having worked in schools for a very long time, I know that there is no such thing as a typical school year or as a typical school day. And the last several years have really emphasized that. And as we go through this process, the goal is to provide you with the tools you need to be successful, and not with and not with unreasonable expectations, but to really support people in being able to think creatively, have a thought partner as you go through this work, and support the work and the roles you already have, and hope the goal would really be to hopefully to make your job easier now and have more support there. So just thank you for highlighting that. And I'd love if we could just sort of jump into the first question that I have planted. And Jen, I think I'll throw it to you first. And that sort of ties into this idea of flexibility. There is so much going on right now, so much. Why would we focus on school climate right now? I'm just going to throw that to you, Jen, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Well, I'm just going to start by saying something that I love to tell everyone who will listen, is that school climate is not the icing on the cake. It's the whole cake. And that's especially true. It's especially true right now. So Phil touched on the issue of equity. And I really believe, and the research bears out, that school climate improvement is one of our best tools for equity in education. And so making sure that schools are a place of belonging for all students, and that we are dismantling some of those systems that keep some students behind where other students have the chance to race ahead. And that's always been true of school climate work, but it's never been truer than right now with what we're all going through with the COVID-19 pandemic. We have seen across this country the great divide, right? In academic gains, in connection and connectivity in so many ways. And yeah, the equity issues are bigger than ever. And so I know sometimes it's like, I hear, at least here where I am in Texas, a lot of focus on learning loss. And that's really, really important for equity. But all those underlying school climate factors that go with learning loss is, they can't be ignored. They're the whole cake. So right now, as we all in education seek to re-engage students, whether they have fully disengaged from school or whether their engagement changed because of COVID and virtual school, our big task right now is to re-engage students and their families, right? And so it's hard to do that without a positive school climate. And so school climate improvement goes 100% hand in hand with re-engaging everyone back into a love of learning, a sense of belonging, and thriving in the school environment. So for me, it's just the right time for everyone to lean into school climate improvement.
Thank you, Jen. Phil, what are your thoughts? Why school climate? There's so much going on. Why would we talk about this now?
I think it goes back to what I'd said earlier in terms of program approaches by themselves, whether it's a curriculum or a specific kind of program, are important but insufficient by themselves. What's necessary is having things in place that are responsive to the reality of kids' lives, and being able to adapt the school structure and the adults who are supportive of kids' learning and growth, so that they can really make a difference in kids' lives. So that, some of the well-intended but huge mistakes that we've seen in American education in the last 15 years were based on a misunderstanding of the way in which kids learn the social emotional basis for learning, and for a misunderstanding of the importance of bonding to the school environment. That this is the place, the civic space where our society says we are teaching kids how to be good people as well as good citizens. And if the adults in the school don't understand their role in that broader context, then we're not going to be grounded in sound principles of human development. And so the orientation of school climate offers both the lens and the context for a continual reassessment of where we are today and where we need to go. So it's a process, a continual process, not just a single approach.
Great. Thank you, Phil. The next question would be, and Jen, I'm going to have you start with this one as well, but who would benefit from a school climate leadership certification? We can think about like who would be a good fit, which we sort of started talking about at the beginning, but also maybe where does that ripple a little bit in the terms of the benefit of the experience?
Sure. Yeah, I think Phil teed it up nicely in his intro in that the school climate leadership certification is not just beneficial for school principals, district leaders. It's really relevant and powerful for anyone who plays a role in school climate improvement already in education, or wants to, or feels passionate about school climate. And so just, speaking from my own experience, something that Phil and I talked a lot about during my coaching was the difference between my role and a school leader's role, and what can I do with and without the school leader in collaboration. And so really exploring the pros and the cons of having positional leadership versus emergent leadership. And so I fell into that category of more like emergent leadership, as I know many people on this webinar do. And what that means is like you may not be the person in charge of the whole entire school or the district, but you have a lot of power and you have a lot of passion. And so the certification program can be perfect for folks in roles like ours, where it's actually a huge part sometimes of our job description to do school climate work. And so for me, the reason I got into it and a big benefit for me was exactly as Hannah said, it just made my job better and easier, made me more successful at my job. And so I do believe folks like communities and schools where I work, or community school coordinators, many other folks have been doing great school climate work forever. And we were actually sometimes one of the first folks doing school climate work, like before it was like a thing in education, right? When it was like the icing on the cake. It was the other, not the whole cake. And now it's widely accepted for the most part that it's the whole cake. And so, so that's exciting. And there are those of us who have the privilege of having jobs that can focus more on this than on the curriculum model, like as a specific example, or on running the entire school. So yeah, I think, but Phil touched on this, which is something really critical, is that you're willing to and able to get in there, do some organizing, amass an inclusive representative school climate leadership team. So you have to have, even if you're not the school leader, you sort of have to have the collaboration and the power to do that. Because without that, it's difficult to make true school climate improvement. And so again, if you've been doing school climate work for a while, or that's a big part of your role, but you want to know that it's impactful, you want to know, really know what you're doing when it comes to inclusive voice, measurement, choosing the right initiatives instead of just throwing initiatives at it, then this certification program is a really good fit.
Awesome. Thank you, Phil. What do you have to add? That was great, Jen. Thank you.
That's a pretty comprehensive view, I think. I think just to add on, in terms of the question, if you're somebody who has that kind of passion and knows that you have leadership and some consultation skills and want to hone them by working on real problems in the school that you have a significant role in, then this could be very useful for you. We hope it's going to be a meaningful credential as well, adding to your professional portfolio. And I think the other thing is it's something that because it's practice oriented, that you take with you. It's not like a course where you learn some neat stuff and then 5 years later you have no idea what it was why about that course that was relevant to your role. We think this is relevant to people in the kind of roles that Jen described. And also there's some technical learning as well that's important. The assessment piece and learning how to work with school climate assessment data, how to get people engaged, how to get students involved in this whole process. We talked about student voice. Well, this is not a minor issue. It's in some respects at the core of a change in attitude about how students and parents as well, and community people should be participants in change processes. So that's something that's core to the approach. And Jen mentioned the school team, that the school team can be a team that's already in existence and is partially repurposed. But you've got to have a core group of adults in the school who agree that this is something that they want to address and is meaningful. So that's an important caveat, I think. If you're somebody who wants to do this, but you have no hope of having a team to work with or to create with building leadership, it's probably not going to work really well. Because we spend a lot of time looking at issues of trust and how adults are relating to each other in the school. So that's kind of a quick insight into how we start the process.
Great. Thank you. And then Jen, I'm going to lean into you a little bit for this one too. When we think about the different components of the program, we have some like practical stuff where you're going to be like in your school, like using some tools to really lead the school through the process. We have some readings and reflections. And then throughout that whole process, you have a coach. Jen, can you talk a little bit about your coaching experience, and then your coach afterwards can talk about a little bit about his coaching experience working with you. Great, go ahead.
Absolutely. So the coaching was by far my favorite part of the certification program because, as you can tell, it's that intermediate step, right? Like reading, learning, writing, and then I would meet with Phil once a month to sort of make sense of not just the articles and the interesting things I was learning, but also the modules, right? The real tools I was learning for school climate improvement. And so I had the opportunity to meet with Phil and sort of talk through making sense of that. And then, of course, how it applies to the work that I was doing. And so, so many times Phil helped me through some pretty interesting roadblocks, and I appreciated that the program was flexible, and that was mostly because of Phil's coaching. He was really flexible with me when I would say like, I know it's supposed to be like this, but here's what's happening on this campus, and so what modifications can I make? Or okay, here's what I'm thinking to do next, but what do you think? And so sometimes it was reflecting on successes and failures of me trying to lead a school climate team and where to go with it next. And sometimes it was giving me great feedback on what I was planning or what was coming up for me. So I really relied on that coaching once a month and it was just that re-anchor point for me. We know we get really busy in the day-to-day. As Hannah mentioned, working on school campuses is like, woo, it's a whirlwind. And the coaching brought me back to, let's revisit the process. Are we following the process? Where are we going? And so I really appreciated that aspect of it. And I'll kick it over to Phil.
I think one of the hallmarks of the way in which the coaching is structured is that we expect it to be a real relationship and to try to help model the kind of consultation skills that we're asking you to use in your role with your colleagues and others. So that's something that's always been very important to me. Another thing that I mention is that we've continually learned from the people we're coaching, which is also part of any real relationship. It's a two-way street. So it's not infrequent that after the program had been in existence for a couple of years, that as an issue or a problem would come up with someone I'm coaching, I would say, here's the way, Jesse in Timbuktu did this. I think, let me either hook you up or let me see if I can, I'll share with you the workshop agenda that she used with her team that seemed to be really effective. So some of the tools that we've developed really have been refined, not just based on our experience, but based on the experience of the people that we're working with. Yet throughout, the basic structure seems to have held up remarkably well, which gives us some confidence that it can be a meaningful process for the people we're working with. And as I suggested before, it's a wide range of backgrounds and skill sets, people we've been coaching. And yet the actual process itself seems to be have some real meat to it. And so working with Jen, that meant, well, here's somebody who's highly motivated and is in a wonderful position to make a difference in the schools that she manages and is working in, and already has really started the process before we even engaged. So how can we take advantage of who she is and what she's in her role to maximize both her learning, but also ability for us to learn from her?
Thank you both. And I think this is the last question before we open it up to the group, but what kinds of activities might you do in your school? What might this practicum piece look like or feel like in a more like concrete, granulated, what on earth, what are we getting myself into sort of way? Jen, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to know is the certification program or certification process, certification program necessitates actually implementing the school climate improvement process. And so oftentimes when I talk to folks about school climate, they think like, oh yeah, like I'm definitely doing that. I'm in charge of my PBIS team on campus. And like, that's what I'm going to be doing. And that's great. Things like that are a big part of school climate improvement. But the kind of things that you'll be doing with your school through this process is pretty much leading or co-leading in some cases a true school climate improvement team. And so that was something that was really new for me, and it was so cool. And so my experience had been going in, right, implementing the communities in schools model or program, or like going in and doing whole school restorative practices, for example. Again, that's a really important process. That might be the thing that you choose along with your inclusive team to implement. But this is so much more than an initiative implementation. It's facilitating the school climate improvement process. So it'll be lots of collaboration with the school team, but also amassing an inclusive school climate leadership team, including teachers, community members, ideally families, student voice being a particular focus. I led an entire student school climate team, like basically a student voice school climate improvement team. And so that was one activity I did with one of the schools that I work with. And so I'm meeting regularly with the school climate, convening the school climate leadership team to check in, to look at the data, to be gathering feedback, is a really critical activity to doing this certification program. And then again, depending on your role, you might also be the lead person on the sort of initiatives or changes that are chosen to improve the school climate. Or you may not be. You may be just facilitating the school climate leadership team and coordinating other folks to do some of the implementation of initiatives that you will then facilitate, kind of like the monitoring and ongoing work. So I'll leave it at that and see what Phil wants to correct or add.
It's certainly true that it depends on what's going on in the individual school you're working with, and we modify the activities to some extent based on that. But for sure, I mean, you'll be looking at different ways of building trust, for example, So there's some tools that help examine what's going on in the relationships in terms of this, both within the faculty, but also what are the issues between the community and the parents and the school? How do we understand better than the quantitative data show us? How do we understand better what's going on with 7th grade girls? Because something seems to be going on and we need to know more about it. So, how to really to manage, run a focus group that's going to provide qualitative data, for example, is something that we found to be very, very useful. And then in terms of action planning and implementation, you'll be looking at seeing planning as an ongoing process, so that accountability is one aspect of it, but also looking at how in implementing an existing plan, there need to be constant modifications, and that the team can take responsibility for making things really, a live process, rather than something that everybody's just pointing fingers and say, why didn't you do that? Why didn't this happen? So we expect there to be bumps in the road, and how to handle those bumps is one of the activities that we try to help people with.
Thank you. I'm hoping that this has given our participants sort of a general sense of the shape and nature of the certification program, but I'm also imagining that we may have some other questions. So I'm actually going to stop sharing. And if there's anyone who has questions or other pieces of this process that seem unclear, or they'd like to know more about, if you can either raise your hand and ask out loud, or feel free to drop into the chat. Either of those would be totally fine. Or Ellie, if there's anything that you'd like to add at this point, please feel free to.
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, Ms. McDonald. Yes.
Hi. Good. Hi, my name is Chicago Perry, and I work with community schools in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I'm happy to see a fellow CIS person sitting on this panel. And so in my position, I'm currently a site coordinator, so I work within the high school. And I'm also a site coordinator too, which is just another level of support that I provide for fellow site coordinators on my team. So I just wanted to ask Jen, one, your specific role with NCIS at your school, and then how going through the certification process changed your role and the responsibilities and the programming that you had at your school during the school year.
Great question. So I didn't get too much into my specific role, but I'm actually not a site coordinator, which are our full-time staff on a particular school campus, although I was back in the day, about 14 years ago. But my current role is as the Chief Program Officer. So my job is to support and oversee all of the CIS programs in Central Texas. So we're in about 100 schools this year. And so I support the work of folks on 100 school campuses. But when I was working on my school climate leadership certification, I did, as Phil mentioned, choose a specific campus to get really hands-on. And that's not a typical part of my current role. But I did get really hands-on with one of our middle schools that was going through a significant school turnaround situation, and took on the sort of school climate improvement process at that school. So for me, I mean, I could speak to what it would be like as a site coordinator, but I think I'll just say, for my role, it really impacted me because it helped me see how, in general, staff in roles like ours can impact and influence school climate improvement. Now, each of us is in a really unique relationship with our school, in our role, so it's going to look different for everybody. But for me, it was really exciting to see that we can do not just, right, I mentioned we've been doing school climate work forever, since the beginning of our organizations, but to really facilitate the school climate improvement process, that was new and that was cool. And that's changed my role and like my life, like career-wise and personally for sure. And that's become a lot more of a focus for my work now, instead of just focusing on student and family services, helping and training my whole team to understand school climate, why it's important, their role in the school climate improvement process has been like kind of what I've taken from the certification program.
Thank you.
I have a question. Hi, TK
Hi.
McDonald from the Village Learning Place in Baltimore. And we are an out of school time program. And so I think our collaboration with the school is extremely vital to our students. So that's why, I feel that it's important that I am a part of learning, about school climate and things that can be implemented. And also, we want to create the same climate within our organization because we serve like 100 students from the school that's diagonally across the street.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to know, what do you guys see as the role of OST inside of this school climate process?
That's a really great question. I think you're hitting on so many important ideas when we think about some, and I think one thing that continues to be happening to the field of school climate is sort of breaking down the barriers we sort of artificially put around what school is. That obviously happened during the pandemic when we were like, oh, actually, it's not just a building. This is so much bigger. And I think the school climate improvement process necessarily recognizes that young people are not in school from period 1 to period 8 and then suddenly it's a whole different universe, that actually like the lived experiences of young people continue into the out of school time places, school time spaces, and sometimes those are even shared spaces. And true school climate transformation is not going to happen if you're not at that table. Right. And that if there's a disconnect between what's happening in out of school time and what's happening in the day school, that's confusing for our young people and can be harmful. It can be really harmful. And I think that there are certainly opportunities to think about this partnership in a way that is able to honor the work that OST has been doing for way longer than a lot of sort of more traditional educators during the day have been going. Do you have a close partnership with the school that your kids come from?
Yes. And well, the sad part is I had a great connection with the community school coordinator, but she has moved on and they have not gotten a new one yet.
Okay.
But just hoping that the
Yeah.
same connection will be there. The principal is dedicated to staying in close connection with us. We have a relationship with the PTO. So it is definitely a strong connection there.
That's wonderful. And I think as you think about sort of your like the plans for your program and the plans for the program with the school, that connection is going to be incredibly important. Jen or Phil, do you have anything to add to Ms. McDonald's thoughts?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, you're kind of waiting to see who the community school director or coordinator is going to be, and hope that will allow you the same kind of relationship. So I think it's certainly critical that if you decide to enter this program, that we kind of look closely at what kind of meaningful relationships are going to enable you to really be successful. And we've certainly had examples where things have not worked well. Usually that's been because of something that's happened in the school where the people involved who were interested in the beginning just say, no, we can't do this anymore. And where we've had to look for people had to look for a different school or a different way of engaging the program. So there's a lot of flexibility, but there are some limits to that as well. And I think we can acknowledge that. That is, if there's no interest in the school that you're to engage in this kind of work, then it's going to be very difficult and frustrating down the line. So, but that's the kind of thing that we would work on in the beginning. Make sure that the environment is going to allow you to move forward.
Right. And how powerful it could be if that was like deeply centered in your partnership with the principal, and seeing like this is not a work of the day school or the work of out of school time, but this is work that we're doing together for our young people. My fingers are crossed for a strong partner in that space, so you can continue to do that good work. Thank you. Any other questions, either about the program or about any experiences here?
I had one more quick question. Is there a fee for the program, or is it, I'm not sure how is that supposed to work?
Yeah, I'm actually going to let Ellie talk about the funding for this particular cohort. Ellie, are you available to talk about that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say we're not there yet, but we are working on trying to find at least some underwriting for the tuition costs, which Hannah can speak to. And if anybody has any ideas for me, because we've done some outreach to some local foundations, and hopefully we can get to the place for at least Baltimore that we can at least provide some partial scholarships for this experience. So Ramapo and I we're beating the streets, so to speak, for that, because we think this is really important and we don't want the cost of it to be a barrier. But it does have a cost, and we'll have to figure out how to pay it. As I always tell my kids, nothing's free. Whenever they come to me and they're like, "Oh, this is free, Mom," I'm like, "Nope, somebody's paying for it somewhere." So we're going to try to figure out how somebody else can pay for it, though.
Right. The overall cost for the 2-year program for the whole thing is like, I believe it's $9,500 for the full 2 years. And those are paid in increments over the course of, you can sort of think about it like a tuition bill where you can pay it in chunks as you go through the program. But yes, we are looking for funding support to alleviate some of those stretches and impacts on our programs. Are there any other questions? Ellie, did we miss anything in our overview of what we were talking about?
The only thing I would ask is, like, if you were to, regardless of whether we come up with money or not, if you wanted to proceed, how would you go about applying for or approaching being part of a cohort?
Absolutely. I think that probably the best way for us to move forward with this right now would be, and Ellie, you can yell at me if this is not a good plan, but I'm thinking that if they email Ellie, if they email you and CC me, and I'll put my email address in the chat. That was the word, in the chat. I'll put that in the chat, and then we can identify some next steps. And the application process is really just wanting to make sure that you're in a position where we can start this in a way that's going to be successful and move forward. It's not a, are you worthy? It's a, how do we make sure that we're starting this at the moment in time that is going to be most effective for you, and you'll have the most traction and get the most bang for the time investment in particular as you work through this process. So I'm gonna right now drop my email into the chat. I can't talk and do that at the same time. There we go. That's my email. If you are interested, please reach out, and we would love to start talking about how we can develop some next steps. And there's Ellie, so just email both of us, and we'll put some lists together and find ways to support you in that work. Wonderful. Well, it is, y'all, we started right on time, and it is 10:58. I'm feeling some really good August vibes from this. This is great. Thank you all for your time here, and Phil and Jen, thank you for your wisdom and sharing of your experiences. Really appreciate, and Ellie for getting all this set up and for hosting us. And for all of you for joining and asking such good questions. This, Ellie's been recording it. So I think we'll be able to send this out if you have other people you think maybe be interesting to see if the school across my street wants to do this in collaboration with us. Wouldn't that be a cool idea? Great.
Thanks
All
so
right,
much, everyone.
everybody. Just a little plug, if you are applying for the MSDE, ARP, ESSER, RFP, that was a lot of letters strung together. The Maryland State Department of Education, ARP, ESSER, after school RFP that is due this Friday. And you are still looking for maybe a last minute partner or two to throw in that application. Maybe you want to add a STEM enrichment or an arts partner, or you just are looking for something. Or maybe you're looking to collaborate with another organization in some way on this big proposal. We're doing a little mixer this afternoon at 4 p.m. It's just going to be like a kind of a I want, I need kind of thing. Hold on, I will drop the link real quick if I can find it. There it is. Copy and paste into the chat. Love to have you there if you're in that boat. I know it's last minute, but the RFP was kind of last minute, so this is something people have been asking for, and so we're trying to help meet people's needs in these final hours before that RFP is due. So I'll look forward to seeing some of you there, maybe, and of course, if you're make sure that you're on our newsletter to get all the information. You can pretty much sign up at any page on our website. So I will be talking with you all soon. And thank you, Hannah, Philip, and Jen for being here today.
Thank you all. It's good to be here. See you later.
Thanks.